Charlie Kirk destroys man bun idiot with facts and logic, brother.
It's good to meet you, Charlie. I hope you can understand first rule. I'm a little nervous. There's a very real chance I could wake up tomorrow, front page of YouTube. Charlie Kirk owns man bun idiot with facts and logic. So
destroys.
Yeah, destroys. Okay, so my question is...
Good. I'm happy they had the inside joke ready and named the title what he recommended.
I agree that stable monogamous relationships often produce the best outcomes for society. But if that structure really works for everyone, why do we consistently see societies, once they become safer and more prosperous, move away from traditional monogamy? And why do so many marriages still end in divorce, even among people who generally try to make it work? And just one final framing there. If you believe in free markets because they are decentralized and they adapt to reality without top-down control, and given the individual ability to form healthy long-term pair bonds very significantly with factors like genetics and ecologically calibrated attachment styles, why do you reject top-down control in economics, but not extend that same rejection to human behavior in terms of marriage?
Okay, so the first one, the second law of thermodynamics answers your question, is that it's the law of decay. Societies tend to decay against the roots that created them. For example, as a side note, here in this country, you guys invented the idea of free speech. You brought it to the world. You guys do not have free speech in this country anymore. 30 people a day are arrested in the UK for inflammatory social media posts. Someone by the name of Lucy Connolly is currently facing prison time for a Facebook post that was critical of migrants. It is normal, unfortunately, for civilizations to get away from how they once operated and how they once were. Now, to your question, does that answer the first part of your question? You were saying, why do they get away from monogamy? I want to make sure I'm answering your question.
I would say I don't feel that that's a full answer.
Okay, so you're asking why do they get away from what works? Is that correct?
Yes. Well, why do societies make this change once they become more prosperous?
Oh yeah, okay. I mean, because prosperity leads to degeneracy, for sure. That would be the answer. And so once you are prosperous,
a big free speech debate in general is how much hatred of certain races or certain groups can you cause before it's an issue. So obviously you cannot in America call anyone to violence, but you can be an open neo-Nazi. You can go protest with swastikas. You can say we need to put people in slavery and do a bunch of crazy stuff to people that we view as subhumans, or as the KKK would say as the subclass of people. So you can have that in America. But in Europe, for example, in Germany, they're really sensitive towards Nazis for a reason. So when they make new laws, their laws are not as pro free speech for someone who might be spreading neo-Nazi ideas. So that is a big debate in these countries on how far to go on policing certain types of speech. In America, not all speech is free, by the way. There are restrictions even in America. So it comes down to severity on what you actually do police.
you tend to no longer have the moral guardrails or the limitations. Let's just say you no longer have delayed gratification because you have instant gratification because you have a surplus of goods, and then you have a decline of a transcendent
Someone said if our World War II soldiers were alive today, they would side with the Nazis, and so would I. Nice.
moral order. The second part of the question, can you remind me, please, what the second question was? About markets?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, for example, I believe in intervention in markets if there is something that is improper morally. So, for example, I do not believe that you should be able to scam your neighbor or have misleading advertising, because I believe in a transcendent moral standard, and the same goes for my personal views on marriage.
Okay, so I think we largely agree on the foundation. I would like to propose something that you might like to think about. So, firstly, I absolutely acknowledge that, again, if everyone in society was able to maintain healthy long-term pair bonds, that would be best. Again, there's strong data showing that independent of socioeconomic factors, broken homes are some of the strongest predictors of poor life outcomes.
We totally agree.
Yes. And even, I'm not sure if many people here are aware of this, but if you track, as countries become...
Well, no, it's not about why is OKC doing so bad tonight? Why is OKC doing bad? I want the Pacers to win, so I don't really care. It's not about butthurt feelings, okay? It's about race riots being started. In the UK, there have been literal race riots started by fake posting. And with AI, I don't know if you all have seen the AI videos out recently in the past week from that VO3 or whatever it's called. But if you can post fake videos that call people to some sort of violent action with no repercussion at all, we're going to be in a really bad place for society. So the goal would be to either, suppress calls to violence on social media, maybe ban AI videos. But if you post something about a minority group and that leads to a race riot where people go and then attack members of that minority group, that is different from simply hurting someone's feelings. That's what the conversation in the UK is ultimately about. Please drop a like, comment, and subscribe for the algorithm. Also consider supporting my channel in the description down below. Thank you.
Become more socially egalitarian. Somewhat surprisingly, rates of female depression and anxiety also spike disproportionately. So I think one of the problems here is that when you try and impose moral absolutism, inevitably, again, due to variance in attachment issues, due to industrialized culture, absent parents, screens, raising kids, around 50% of adults in the West develop attachment disorders, which make it very difficult to maintain long-term pair bonds. And then additionally, you have things like variation in oxytocin receptors, in density, in shape, also in vasopressin. There are going to be, even if there's 5% of people who feel that these rules really do not fit them, they will push back. And this will create ideologies that then grow into more wider appealing ideologies, which then leads to the change. I think this is what happened in the sexual revolution. It started with a push for female autonomy, and then it was almost morphed into a really exaggerated expression of pushing for maximizing individual freedom. And I think that when you try and...
and by the way, the people in the chat talking about Muslims in the UK, I mean, you can use the justification for any group. Okay, one person did a crime. I mean, they did this in Nazi Germany as well. This one Jewish person did a crime. This is an example of why all Jews must be gone. All right, that's an example they use in America. Here's one immigrant that committed a crime. That means all immigrants must be gone. Here's one person that did a crime. Everyone must be gone from this group because we deem them to not be first-class citizens like we are. So you can use that justification as much as you want for anything. But of course, in the modern world, people can avoid facts and logic and data and statistics and just rely on bias and internet trolling. So
impose moral absolutism this way, it just inevitably causes pushback. And I think if you were to, as someone with a platform, instead say, hey, monogamy is great, it works best for most people, but I also understand there are some people it doesn't work so well for, more people would hear the message that you want to push.
Okay, thank you for that. That's an interest. I've actually never gotten that question before. It's very thoughtful.
The world is waking up to the power of...
Nice.
The platform, instead say, hey, monogamy is great, it works best for most people, but I also understand there are some people it doesn't work so well for, more people would hear the message that you want to push.
Okay, thank you for that. That's an interest. I've actually never gotten that question before. It's very thoughtful. Would you say you're against...
Someone said, oh, it's because the Muslim crimes are a lie. No, it's because saying that all Muslims are represented by these crimes, that is a lie. And that is the lie that's pushed. In America, Americans love saying immigrants are more violent than other groups of people, when in reality, they're less violent. Now, different countries can have different metrics here, but the point is, of course, which you understand as well, but you don't care about the facts of it because you want to put bias upon these groups. But the point is, obviously, we don't want people to be attacked just because we put stereotypes on them or if we connect one person committing a crime to everyone. We did not say, for example, that every single Christian in America needs to be exterminated because the KKK was a terrorist group. And because many Christians today agree with the KKK's positions on banning books and on making English the only language in America and banning other languages. Just because they agree on those things with the KKK does not mean they are the KKK. We would never draw that equivocation. But you do against like Muslims and stuff because you don't like that group.
Moral absolutism then?
Yes, I would.
Are you against that absolutely?
No, I'm very open to having my mind changed. And
so it's not an absolute thing?
Well, I'm against moral absolutism.
Are you against moral absolutism? Absolutely.
No.
Okay, so then you're consistent. So
I think
it's all just kind of, it's preference, not, it's about preference. And you could just basically do whatever you prefer. There is no transcendent moral order.
Well, I think what you're doing though is slightly unfairly putting me into a loop because I'm very open to having my mind changed.
No, that's what I'm saying though is that by definitionally, and this is something that will keep on coming back, you must choose what moral standard we live by. I'm very clear as to what moral standard. The lie of the West, of modernity, the last 30 years, is that we're going to have you live and let live and there will be no moral standard. That itself is a moral standard. And it's a really bad one. And to your point, that yes, it creates more suffering, it creates more despair. And no, I disagree with what you say, and I respect the heart of which you're saying it. I will say that I have a moral obligation not to accommodate when people fall short, but instead try to lift them up towards the standard that is true and that I know that works.
So where I'd push this is I'd ask you, you describe people falling short when they fail to engage in long-term monogamy. What do you think causes that? Why do you think some people struggle?
Many reasons. Economic is one of them, but the biggest is the death of religion and the death of Christianity in the West. As America, I'll just talk about America. The UK is unfortunately far less churched than America, but as America has become less churched, so many of these social ills rise.
So one thing I'd say, I study the evolution of behavior, in particular sexual romantic behavior. If you track all the different hunter-gatherer cultures that we can study, and we track how agriculture shapes things, you see that ecological conditions really reliably predict the prevalence of monogamy, certain marriage systems, and what I think is what we refer to as attachment.
Drop likes. I'll take phone calls once I get a certain number of likes. I only have 23 right now, and there's 400 people watching. So we're at 23 likes. I need at least 50 likes. I'll take phone calls.
Issues. They seem to be an ecological calibration to an environment. In environments that are more unstable, it's less optimal for an individual to grow up with a tendency to rely on long-term pair bonds. And I think there's a mismatch with the modern world, again, coming back to industrialization. There are so many people who raise kids, as absent parents, daycare is massively linked to attachment issues. This then causes people to struggle to bond long term. And then again, coming back to the genetic part, there's again real research showing that especially vasopressin mutations and oxytocin mutations, some people really just do not have the proclivity for this.
What brings stability? Because you say stability is a good thing, and what would bring stability?
So first of all, I would say we had what you might consider stability in the previous century, and then it became unstable. And then things...
Why?
I'm saying because moral absolutism was imposed.
Moral absolutism was lost. You see, modernity rose. We started to teach our kids moral relativism, and we got rid of moral absolutes. So it's the opposite.
So why was it lost?
Moral
was it lost
relativism
because
is the
people stopped
issue.
pushing
Stop
for
bringing this
top-down?
question to a close.
Why was it lost? That's a question for far smarter minds. I can only tell you that it was. In America, it's honestly one of the worst decisions, not just worst ideas ever, which is modern feminism, largely from Betty Friedan's feminist mystique, which acted as if every woman who's in a monogamous marriage in the States is in some sort of tyrannical environment. And it has led to...
Well, I did not comment on that video at all, but there's a reaction responding to chat. Thank you, chat, for the amazing talks about why you hate Muslims. Very nice. I don't understand Islam. Oh, I don't think you understand Christianity. So whenever there's a Muslim, or at least someone that is saying Islam caused their terror attack, there are academics from, Muslim academics who are writing, hundreds of academics writing against ISIS, for example, going through the Quran and talking about why ISIS has it all wrong, the same way that Christians went through and said the KKK had it all wrong, okay? So these conversations happen in every religion. Every religion has been used to justify violence, and acting like you are the pure ones is never going to work out for anyone. Every single one of us is media. For us to overcome what's happening right now, we all need to push in the right direction. Whether you make your own content, if you share my content or another creator you like, thank you so much for supporting this. We all need to do our job, and I really appreciate what you have to give, whether it's financial or not. If you cannot afford to donate, do not donate. Share the video around, drop a like, comment, subscribe. You are helping more than you could ever imagine.